This is Datto's opinion on The Edge of Fate, which has proven to be one of the more controversial expansions in Destiny 2's history. Let's hear what he has to say.
Okay, I am here. Opinion is here. Let's finally talk about my first impressions of this expansion, Edge of Fate. I am sorry for the delay on this. There's a lot I wanted to discuss. The script's pretty long. I had to prepare for the raid, and then I had the raid, and then I had the raid guide, and then I had the GCX convention. I've been very busy, but we're here. Let's talk about the story first. There will be spoilers in this, so if you haven't finished the campaign, you might just want to skip ahead. We are starting something new here for the first time since, I guess, Destiny 2 launch, which had a very simple premise. Gaul wants Traveler's Light, gimme gimme, must stop him. This new story that's revving up had a bit more going on, and I got a lot of, I'll be nice, I'll say, I got a lot of feedback early on from people that they thought the story was bad. And when I asked why, the majority of the responses were, I didn't understand what was happening. I think that's a fair criticism to have if you felt that it was a bit harder to follow, but I'm not sure how fair it is to say that the story was bad because you couldn't follow along. I did not think it was that bad to follow along with the story, even as someone who was playing with multiple other people who were talking during some dialogue, and as someone who only gets into the lore at a pretty surface level.
All right, so my first opinion on this is that The Edge of Fate wasn't extremely hard to follow along with, but it definitely required your attention significantly more than the example he gave here, which was the Red War campaign. The Red War was as straightforward as it gets. Our tower that we love and that we've spent so much time in is literally on fire. Commander Zavala is getting his ass beat, literally. We also have our traveler entrapped in this like crazy vice, and then Gaul himself comes down into our tower and literally Chuck Norris kicks us off the edge, right? That evokes a really strong emotion and really made the Red War campaign beloved by pretty much anyone that played the campaign at that time. Whereas this story and this narrative didn't quite pack nearly as much of a punch. It was a little more convoluted, a little harder to follow along with. I still do actually think it was a good story overall. It's just a different approach and a different outcome, but the Red War campaign is absolutely goated and definitely blows Edge of Fate out of the water every time, in my opinion.
That being said, I do want to run the campaign again to make sure that I've locked in on some of the things that happened, because while I was following pretty well with the whole the 9 plot points, some of the House of Exiles stuff got a little lost on me in the middle. But I thought as an introduction to the storyline of the 9,
which should be said that for someone that's a 10 plus year Destiny veteran like Datto himself, if even he's getting a little bit lost on some of this, imagine new players, right? Like this was meant to be an entry point for new players to jump into the game, and I feel like for them, they're probably the ones getting lost, the majority of the ones getting lost, right? If you've been playing Destiny for a long time, it made a little more sense to you where we're going. Obviously, the characters are still the existing characters that we've known for a while. Like, obviously, got Ikora in here, and various others are, some of the main characters we're dealing with. Obviously, Lodi is a brand new character, so that does incorporate a lot of new elements that everyone is sort of figuring out and discovering at the same time. But I really think that it speaks volumes that someone who's such a veteran Destiny player, even he is admitting to getting lost a little bit. So I think maybe Bungie missed the mark in that regard. Let me know how you felt about the campaign. Were you able to follow along all of the different narrative beats from start to finish?
getting to meet them in a scene towards the end, all that was pretty cool, and I'm looking forward to seeing where they take this plot line. We also haven't gotten a ton of like pre-collapse lore bits or like pre-golden age, pre-anything really at the surface level. So a lot of the reveals that happened towards the end of the campaign I thought were pretty cool. The story, in short, I think was that we were called to Kepler by 3 of the 9 who was actually dead and summoned us to bind the 9, whatever the hell that will end up meaning. The reality of everything that's happened in the franchise has been that the 9 have not so subtly been causing the many situations that have all led us to this moment right now. We were also dealing with the House of Exile, namely the Archon, as part of the story hook for this expansion specifically, whereas the stuff with the 9 is going to be more of the long-term story. I wasn't too enamored with the House of Exile and the Aeonian stuff personally. I didn't think it was bad, but my eyes were all on the stuff happening with the 9 first and foremost.
So in regards to the Aeonians, I did feel like it felt a little cheap that they didn't actually have like voice lines. They just had the text and we had to read the text. I'm not vibing with the text, all right? I like the voice lines in Destiny 2, and we got to get rid of the text. I'm not sure if it was a budget thing or what it was, but it definitely doesn't have as strong a feel when you're just reading the text on the screen.
I did think that the Archon was at least a somewhat fun character to be listening to and having conversations with, even if it felt like he was giving a theater-like performance sometimes, although that was likely intended to some degree. Like, I feel like it was directed like that, given his character and the situation that he found himself in.
I actually liked the Archon as well, so I agree with that.
Also, at least the Aeonian campus felt lived in a bit, with like random NPCs scattered around the main hub of Caldera. Some of them like you can talk to with that new dialogue box and all that kind of stuff. Deborah Wilson as Ikora, when she is normally known as Savathun, at the start of the campaign was pretty jarring. I do like the way that Mara Juno plays Ikora, a bit more soft-spoken and reserved, but as the intensity of the situation happening in the story grew, the way Deborah handled Ikora also started to grow on me, and I did end up having a better time listening to her play Ikora than I thought I was going to. For those who were not as interested in the performance, Deborah Wilson is a temporary voice for Ikora due to the newly resolved SAG-AFTRA union strike for
I did not appreciate Savathun's voice as Ikora's. It was, like you said, just jarring. And I'm just so used to hearing that character and associating it with Savathun that I could instantly hear her voice, and I felt like something was so wrong and so off. And Bungie even mentioned that they said they addressed that months prior, but I do not remember them saying anything. It must have been the tiniest footnote in a random corner of a twid, because I didn't remember that actually being a thing. And so it would have been nice maybe if they picked a different voice actor. It didn't ruin the whole story for me by any means. It just felt really weird at first. I was like, what is Savathun doing speaking through Ikora right now?
voice actors. Kind of tough spot for Bungie to be in, seeing as they probably didn't want to launch a major expansion with zero voiceover for some very important characters. Episode Heresy was missing dialogue, and that was a very big deal. I would much rather have characters be voiced by someone than no one at all. Just having
Strongly agree with that. The no voicing of the characters in Heresy, it was such a good story that it feels almost like it was diminished because of that. I could still follow along with it, and I kind of had the voices in my head to some degree, but it would have been so much better. That story would have delivered in such a strong way. I'm happy that Bungie made the decision to fill in the voice actor with someone. You got to make a better decision than to just blurt out, like to have no voice lines at all. So I'm happy they went with the Savathun voice actress instead of nothing, but it would have been nice if they could have found maybe a different workaround.
to read the lines at the bottom of my screen because I probably wasn't going to read it, and a lot of it would not have stuck. As for Lodi, I like him as a character, and it looks like he might be around for a little bit. He feels normal, and that's because he just is normal. I mean, he was literally plucked out of the 1970s or whatever and pulled here. I thought the voiceover performance was pretty good for him overall. He wasn't cringe or anything. He didn't say anything too weird or unfunny. I did like the more theatrical.
He is basically the anti-Nimbus, right? Bungie delivered one of the worst and most hated characters in the Destiny universe, Nimbus. And I think they decided they probably don't want to shoot themselves in their other foot by trying to do that again with the Edge of Fate. So instead they went with, good old faithful, the regular old Joe type of character with this. And I think that was the right decision.
One-on-one that he had with the Archon towards the beginning of the campaign. I thought that was a fun moment. Honestly, my only real complaint is that some of these dramatic pauses were just a little too long. Although I'm not sure if they were recorded like that or just timed in a way in-game that made them seem too long. I did also like Orin, and I wanted a little bit more of her, but again, I want to go back and play the campaign once more to get a better feel for things. I might wait until the original voices are put into the game so I can listen to the differences in performance, though.
That would be nice. So they're going to re-record all the voices with Ikora's actual voice actress, and replaying through the campaign, hearing her voice might actually be worth doing and could be interesting. I'll probably try and do the same.
I do wish Bungie were a little faster on the draw with some of the story stuff, because it did, again, feel a little bit slow going into the first half, with the second half picking up a bit more. Even though when I went to my preview event, we had the dialogue off and the subtitles off, and I had no idea what was happening, things still felt a bit familiar, just even being in the missions over again and all that. So I think that's something that I just kind of need to manage for myself, though, going forward. You know, as soon as some of these bigger plot points started to hit, some of these cutscenes and all that, I got a lot more invested. I got a lot more excited to hear what was happening, especially some of the end cutscenes and whatnot. So, yeah, story-wise, I was like partially to mostly satisfied. I'm okay with there being a lot of unanswered questions, because we're setting up a new story arc, and you're not going to be able to answer everything in a single expansion, much less the first one, nor would you even want to. So let's move to gameplay.
Now, you can't answer all the questions in the first expansion, right? But what you want, and I think he kind of glosses over this, what you want is just a real, like, visceral meaning to the campaign. Like we mentioned before with the Red War campaign, Gaul invades our home, right? And he messes with us. And instead, this is like a planet on the very, very edge of our solar system, like super far away. We're like, why should we really care about this exactly? You know, it just doesn't have the same draw as like the Red War campaign. It didn't really make you feel like you needed to be there and to experience this, and it didn't scream at you in the same way. To play the other side for a moment, I did think it had maybe of a more of a mysterious element to it, and I kind of like that. You know, we don't have to tell the same story over and over again. We don't have to have, you know, Gaul but he's blue this time, and Gaul but he's red this time. Like, that's a little bit, you know, unnecessary. So the mysterious route is not necessarily a bad route to go. You just want there to be a ton of intrigue. Like, you want there to be a nice cliffhanger to be like, oh, I need to know what's next now. Like, you really want that feeling. And if you're going to go the mysterious route like they did, I'm still just not left with that exact feeling of like, I need to know what's next for the story. Like, I cannot wait to see what happens next. It was said, it was kind of like, oh, it was interesting. It was all right. The same way he's kind of responded to this. And I think a lot of people kind of got a similar element to it.
As for this expansion feeling slightly bigger than Rise of Iron, as Bungie claimed, I would say that take holds up, at least when discussing the campaign and Kepler specific experience. The campaign was way longer than Rise of Iron was, but gameplay-wise, when compared to the previous 3 expansion campaigns, I think this one is a little bit on the weaker side of things, not even counting all the Metroidvania stuff. I think the most memorable fight was the finale, which had a couple of fun moments, but nothing on the scale that I feel like we got with something like Witch Queen, which, to me, had the most memorable final boss experience so far. The other campaign fights were fine, but the whole splitting the health bars into 2 or 3 to do one of the Kepler mechanics, it did get a little bit old, and the bosses themselves weren't anything too crazy. But do I still prefer this campaign to stuff pre-Witch Queen, like Beyond Light and earlier? Absolutely I do. Some of the scaling felt
I would agree with that as well.
Little different though. Like, normally the solo campaign experience has felt tougher than being in a stack of 3. This time around though, the legendary campaign did feel like a little bit of a slog due to some of these inflated health pools on enemies. I'm not usually one to complain about tanky enemies, but even for me, some of the enemies felt like they had health for the sake of having health. This, combined with the new ammo generation system, led to a lot of plink-plonk moments firing away with primary weapons at a health bar that just didn't really feel like going down. I felt like I was starved for ammo a lot of the time, and that's because you didn't spawn in with full ammo when you started a mission. Only when I hit a rally flag did I feel like things were somewhat normal. Bungie has since adjusted ammo drop rates though, which I think we discussed one more time in this video. As for the Kepler abilities, I did not hate them. nearly as much as it felt like everybody else did. I didn't mind going into a ball and navigating around an arena or using the cannon to teleport around or like whatever.
Like the typical Reddit user that said, Matterspark murdered my entire family.
But one of my worries for these gameplay elements was mentioned in my preview videos, or my QA, whichever it was, where I said that, quote, it feels like the puzzle solving element was trying to find where the hole in the wall was, end quote, more so than it was actually doing puzzle solving. It's only at the very end of the campaign that I feel like there's any sort of more interesting puzzle solving, or at the very least, novelty of the mechanics. I also got the vibe that
So I wanted to speak on the Matterspark for just a moment, which is that I think that Destiny 2's gunplay is really what sells it as being such an incredible game. So to kind of take you away from that and make you roll around on the ground as like a little marble, not necessarily a bad thing. Like it didn't become the whole entire campaign was rolling around, but it kind of just takes away from what really shines in Destiny 2, which is the gunplay. And we can still create puzzles and all kinds of, obstacles in the way without having to turn into a little ball that goes into the ground. And he is right when he said that it kind of made it trivial because you just had to, turn into the ball and then just find where's the little hole that I need to roll through, right? It didn't add maybe enough puzzle element to it, and I felt like it was just a quirky little trick rather than something that was like meaningful. I don't think we'll ever see Bungie use Matterspark again. And to play the other side for just a moment, though, I will say that, I did kind of like a puzzle solving style of campaign. So because those two went together, I don't exactly hate it as much as other people hate Matterspark. I think that it turning into the puzzle solving key to every little thing was it just kind of made it a little bit obvious for most, puzzles and that you were trying to solve in general. I have mixed opinions basically, and I know that a lot of people really, really disliked the Matterspark. That was like it for them. As soon as they started to roll around as a ball on the ground, they were out. They were done with it. And it actually showed that there was a ton of people that did not complete the campaign comparative to the Final Shape campaign. I think the Final Shape campaign had around 70% people that started it actually completed it, whereas the Edge of Fate had about 50% of people that started the campaign actually completed it. Now, was that because of Matterspark? I don't know. Let me know what you think down in the comments.
there would be a bit more of the, you gotta come back later to do this during the campaign. But since the campaign pushes you towards one of two sections at the start, there's only so much you can do with that while you're in the campaign. After you finish those two sections, I think you're railroaded into the next parts. So it didn't feel like I could go get the teleport cannon first and then look around and find some holes in the wall and then be like, oh, okay, I gotta get that thing next. I don't have that ability. You were just fed the items in order. There were some collectibles and whatnot scattered around the world for when you have most of the upgrades, and those puzzles were at least a little more interesting than what we got during the campaign, although hardly much of a brain buster. Most of the time, the puzzle part just ended up being, okay, where's the thing that I need to interact? Where's the stupid little charge station or like whatever? Because it would be hidden somewhere, like around a corner or up a hill or just out of normal line of sight. But again, I never feel like Bungie gets to do more than just the lowest common denominator type stuff for these concepts because they want to keep things simple enough that people don't get stuck. As a result, we get puzzles that we instantly know how to solve other than finding where the hole in the wall is to make it all happen. Or
that is actually a really fair point to make because this is meant to be a campaign that's an enjoyable experience for everyone of all experience levels and all ages. And if it was actually difficult to solve for like experienced players, there'd be a lot of people complaining, right? There'd be a lot of people upset that they can't solve this thing or get around this. And it might create some other problems. So the campaign is you're meant to make it through without needing to watch a guide, right? Like you don't need a guide to solve the campaign just yet in Destiny 2. And Bungie doesn't want to push it that way. And I think that's probably the right decision overall.
it's some simple trial and error. Nothing ever really made me think too hard. Some of the Matterspark combat stuff was fun, and in those encounters where you can have one person doing one job and another person doing another job, and you just chain things together between your teammates, that feels fun, like the final encounters in the campaign. But the campaign is designed to be soloable, meaning Bungie couldn't really do many things where one person does a thing and then another person has to do another thing at the same time or like immediately after, whatever. Everything is very loose timing wise because you need to be able to do it all yourself, which I understand, but it also feels like a missed opportunity for more novel puzzles or mechanics. I don't think there's anything that required multiple people. There's no fire team based Kepler content at all. So yeah, I just kind of feel like that was a missed opportunity. I realize it was Bungie's first attempt at such a thing, but it just feels like they need to play so scared in stuff like this. Almost like everything else that they've done over the past year, like the exotic missions, right? I don't know if the intent is to make sure
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the dual exotic mission that angered everyone in the Destiny community somehow.
that no one struggles at all, or if they just genuinely don't have any desire to go farther than some of the more basic concepts. I'm sure if I ask someone at Bungie, I'm going to get hit with like some metrics that say like, oh, players will more often quit the game altogether if they feel like they're getting stuck on a puzzle. So we want to make sure that they can get through it without too much of a struggle. That's you, Bungie. And like, okay, that's noble and all, but it means that they just never get to push the envelope until the very end. And I'm using that phrase generously. Or you got like Ghost yelling out what to do after 15 seconds, seeing the puzzle. Like, let me figure it out, man. I'm getting the lay of the land here. Like some of the Matterspark platforming sections in the finale are neat sequences that finally just get to barely start pushing some boundaries, but it's over before you even get to sink your teeth into it. The finale mission is where I want Bungie to start when it comes to these concepts, not end. I'd still rather Bungie try to do something novel and have it not be liked or have it not work out over just continuing to put the same things out every single expansion. Although apparently, from what I've been reading, everyone just wants the same things from before the expansion anyway, so like, what do I know? I've done a very limited amount of mythic world tier stuff on Kepler, but I did end up doing all of the missions for the quest that you get, and they were brutal because of both the lethality of the enemies and the ammo situation. I would like to make some more maybe mythic quality builds to try out the missions again at some point in the near future, though, to give a better assessment of them. Fabled world tier has not really felt that bad at all, though. The portal and the level grind.
Oh, here we go.
A lot to discuss here. I am not super far in my power grind. I think I'm like 240, something like that. And getting to 240 has been incredibly, incredibly easy. Maybe not time-wise, but like the amount of skill that I needed to display in order to get to 240 was not very high. So most of my feedback for the higher level stuff comes from friends who are hitting those higher levels and what I think of those situations. I want to start with this. While I realize that stuff like old raid and dungeon content is probably not what the more casual crowd will be running on a day-to-day basis, I think we absolutely need raid ops and or dungeon ops. For a system that was built to make older bits of content more relevant again, the fact that 0 old raids and 0 old dungeons are included in the portal right now is kind of a travesty to me. I know Bungie has spoken about getting dungeons into Pinnacle Ops to some degree, but old raids absolutely need to be a part of the leveling process. At the very least, a couple of them. I would be okay with
Even a better point than that is not just do the old raids need to be a part of it, the new raid needs to be a part of it. The new raid that just came out, Desert Perpetual, drops +1 drop. Extremely poor drops for how difficult that raid is, all right? That should be giving some of the biggest power drops, especially to incentivize more people to do it. And it's the newest thing in the game. You should want to do it like 100 times over. It's so like fresh, right? Why I don't want to jump into an exotic mission that's been out for 5+ years, right? Or any of these other missions, these moon missions that we're going in and K1 Revelations, right? I want to be doing the new stuff and leveling up with the new stuff. And then when I get bored with the new stuff, sure, that's fine. I'll go into something old. Maybe it's more optimal and will save me some time. But after I've done the new mission, a dozen times or so, then I'll revert back to that.
them just having higher level items to use as infusion fodder for the time being. Like, that's all I want them to do for now. Obviously, it would be awesome if Bungie could go back and revamp the old raids to utilize the new gear system, like weapon and armor tiers and all that, and give them set bonuses, the whole nine, right?
That would be amazing. And if they added feats on the old raids, oh man, then we'd be cooking.
But for now, I would gladly take being able to level through raiding or dungeoning. I realize that someone is going to figure out the best dungeon to run is XYZ on repeat, or the best raid to run on repeat, or the best encounter to farm on repeat. And there's only so much Bungie can do about that besides hyper specific activity reward tuning. But for people who don't plan on torturing themselves, being able to level through dungeoning or raiding, I think would be pretty awesome. The fact that running the newest raid on base difficulty doesn't give you any higher level drops is crazy to me. That is crazy. I can live without getting some tier 3 or tier 4 gear from the raid on base difficulty, but you're not even going to give me some levels, man? So I just want some levels. I guess that would lead to situations where people spam farm certain bosses for levels, so maybe
Let them do it. Let them spam farm the bosses. All of the bosses in this raid are very mechanic heavy and pretty tanky in terms of health.
you could just make it so doing full clears give loot, or like your first clear of the week gives more power, similar to like the red border quest that you would pick up from Hawthorne in the tower. But raids should give a somewhat healthy bump of power at least on first clear of the week. The feats,
I agree, and that was the old leveling system, so maybe Bungie is just trying something new. Maybe they weren't able to fit it in the portal at the launch of Edge of Fate. Does feel like the portal was a little rushed because obviously dungeons should be a part of Pinnacle Ops. I mean, I'm looking forward to that getting dropped in the game in just a couple months from now, but it should have been in at launch, right? Especially raids as well.
system I think is awesome though. I don't think I talked about it much in the raid video because I just didn't have a lot of experience with feats, but after running a 2 and now a 3 feat raid, I thought it was a lot of fun as someone who is very immersed in the raiding scene. What wasn't that fun?
The feats are an incredible addition in terms of how do you want to suffer and how much more rewarded are you going to be for that suffering, right? So if you're looking for a much more casual raid experience, you don't have to throw any feats on. You could just do a normal run of the raid, clear it with Fireteam Finder, etc. Then maybe you build up a friend base, maybe you get some more hardcore people, maybe you got a team ready for contest raid or the epic raid that's coming out. Well, now you're ready to challenge yourself and get your raid team ready. This is going to really elevate everyone that ever has had an interest in doing any sort of like aspirational difficulty, like difficult style raiding, right? If you've ever wanted to clear a contest raid, now is the time to get into Destiny 2 more so than ever because we can customize these raids to make them more difficult to scale upwards. So building a team and getting better at Destiny has never been more of a thing than now than ever before. Like this is definitely the time to become an avid raider due to these feat systems. I'm a big fan of them. I like the feats. I like the customizability in the portal even as well.
Was still getting like tier 1 drops doing a 2 feat raid. Although now that I've completed a 3 feat raid and now have the +1 tier upgrade for raid drops, maybe we'll see a little more consistency there. I feel like 3 feats should be like you get tier 3s, like 3 feats and tier 3, and maybe like some tier 4s on a rare occasion. Hopefully that's how it's going to work soon.
I agree with that. So far, Bungie has been like time gating almost. Like they've been like power gating all of the good drops after you like complete this like immense grind for power. So you have to get up to 400 and only then will you be rewarded with those spicy tier 5s, it seems like. And then that whole system is different in the raid where they've completely separated the two. So instead you have to like do all these raid triumphs and objectives, and then you have to literally wait for the epic raid to come out. The system is it's very time gated, or it's almost like play gated. Like you have to play the game a lot before you can then unlock that thing. And I can see why Bungie would do it because this is going to increase the average play session time for the average Destiny 2 player. That's their overall goal, I believe. We'll see if that proves to be a smart strategy in the long run, though.
Because I know Bungie was making some changes. I do think a base level clear should probably drop tier 2 a little more often, though. It feels kind of bad to run this raid, which is definitely a bit harder than the average raid, and end up with some very poorly statted armor, even if the 4-piece set bonus is pretty nice. So let's get to the Encore torture spam. Quick history lesson. Encore, a mission in the Pinnacle Ops playlist for the first couple of days, was the best place to level up by far. You could do a run in about 15 minutes and get quite a lot of items, especially if there was a target item on the activity. Since then, there has been some rebalancing. I don't think it's even available as of this video, but there's usually a best activity to spam on any given day based on the rewards dropping from said activity. As mentioned earlier, there's only so much Bungie can do to fine-tune the rewards of an activity. If people could save 15 seconds on something to make that the better thing to run for loot, they would run that activity with that 15-second time save. They're just gonna do it.
Which is fine, and that's their choice if they want to. What Bungie could do is incentivize people to play within a more variety. So basically, if you play the same mission over again, let's say once, twice, 3 times, it's going to add those extra engram drops on the other missions that you're not playing. So let's say you farm an encore up every 3 times you clear it, then you get another engram drop on the other exotic mission. So you do it again and again and again. Eventually you stack up, let's say, a maximum of 5 drops on the other exotic missions. At that point in time, it is now much more worth it to do Starcross, Kel's Fall, or Whisper mission over doing another encore because you're just getting so much more leveling from that.
You also have to account for the massive gaps in skill of the player base. For some players out there, Encore is truly a 30-minute run. There is no way that Bungie can fine-tune every activity for every skill band. But Bungie is not making you run Encore 800 times in a row. They're not forcing you to do that. People are choosing that to be at the highest level of efficiency when leveling, and as a result, are hating their lives just to make number go up a little more efficiently. I understand wanting to be at your most efficient while leveling up and playing the game, spending time on the game. I would certainly love to do that. I do not understand inflicting that amount of psychic damage on yourself in order to make it happen. Like, dudes would rather grind 10 hours of Starcross 6 days a week to get to the level cap slightly faster than go to therapy. It is a video game, y'all. If you are...
This was his most controversial take in this, and a lot of people were talking about this on Twitter, Paul Tassi included. And the reason why is because it's such a monotonous grind and so much repetition that, let's say you have to run 1,000 exotic missions, okay? There's only like 4 of them there. So if you have to run 250 of one and then 250 of the other and then 250, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's still going to be an immense amount of repetition, right? It's not like there's 500 missions and you just have to do all of them twice and then you'd have an incredible amount of variety. Like, there's still a very limited amount. And even if you did mix up the variety, if you're trying to get to 450 or above 400 at the very least, so you can start getting tier 5 drops, you're going to be doing the same mission at least dozens of times, if not hundreds of times, to actually get there. That's how incredibly grindy it is. And so you can force inflict like the most painful thing on yourself, right? Which is the encore mission, right? The most efficient one, 1,000 times, and save yourself a decent amount of time. Or you could have that variety and mix it up, but you're still going to have a ton of repetition and it's still going to be probably just as painful, except now you've prolonged your suffering because you're not doing it as efficiently. So everyone is always going to go the most efficient route if they can truly save some time, if the grind is that big of a grind. But if the grind was a little bit less, which is my key point here with all of this, if Bungie actually lowered it, I don't know, 10, 20% maybe, then people would maybe be more incentivized to grind. And especially if like they did what we talked about, where they incentivize the missions that you're doing, that you're not doing, right? They add more engrams to that. Now we have a seriously incentivized portal system that wants you to play all the activities. Like every day, maybe there's a bonus in solo ops. Every day, maybe there's a bonus in fireteam ops and a bonus in pinnacle on a rotation. Now we're really getting people mixing and moving around within the game, and we got the population and all the different playlists and all the different activities really booming, right? I think that would be an incredible future for the portal, and I'm sure Bungie is going to at least try to make that happen, right? Like, they're trying to improve the system. This is the first iteration of it, and this should technically be the worst instance of the portal ever. It should only get better from here, I believe, right?
Torturing yourself just to make a number go up a little bit faster. I'm not sure how much of that is Bungie's fault. That doesn't mean the system's perfect, but when you're choosing to spend 8 hours straight in Encore or Kel's Fall, I don't know what to say to that. Recently, the Mint Retrograde Rocket Pulse was farmable in Kel's Fall. That I can understand, since it's a specific drop tied to a specific activity. You're farming levels and you're farming loot, and like the Rocket Pulse is really, really good, right? But just general leveling, I think people are also still very heavily in the mindset of hitting max level as their primary goal or thing they must do first in order to enjoy the rest of the game. And I don't think that's the right thought process anymore. Like, I don't think the average person should be frantically leveling just for the sake of it. Do I think things could be moving a little bit faster for most people? Yeah, I think probably at least a little bit. I think levels could come a little bit faster. But if you're optimizing the fun out of the game for yourself to make number go up faster, but also complaining that it sucks and that you hate every single second of it, I can't relate. If you find yourself in this position, I would just wait for Bungie to make some adjustments to this, because they will. Like, try to actually enjoy your play sessions. Instead, people are any percent speedrunning their way to being miserable. Now, what I can say is,
In regards to the power level grind, it seems like that's the most rewarding thing to do. Like the tier fives are these new shiny toys that Bungie has locked behind this sort of immense play wall, I'll call it. Like you have to play so much in order to get there. And people just want to get to that as fast as possible. And they're not wrong for it. I mean, Bungie has advertised how awesome these are. And when you actually see when people unlock them and how crazy their stat builds are after unlocking all tier 5 armor, you start to think to yourself, man, I really want to get there. And the fastest way is to just play the same mission on repeat, it seems like, for the most part, or at least the same rotation of like a couple missions for the time being.
that this is hopefully a signal to Bungie that something probably needs to shift here. People should not feel like they need to grind the same activity on repeat to be at their most efficient while they're on the game. People should want the feeling of being at their most efficient, or maybe close to max efficiency, when power leveling, doing truly whatever they want. It is not good optics to have people just spamming the same activity over and over to level and telling people, yeah, the best way to level is to run Encore 16 hours a day, right?
That's actually a fair criticism. It's not good optics for the expansion and for viewers of the Destiny 2 experience of Edge of Fate when they load into all the streams and all the streamers are just farming this years old mission Encore. They're like, this is supposed to be a new expansion, right? Like, what are you guys doing in this old mission? It's like, it's actually terrible optics, which is why the primary focus of leveling should absolutely have come from Kepler missions, the campaign, the whatever solo ops, anything that's Kepler related should have had a bonus to power drops. And there should have been, an exotic mission maybe. There should have been the raid should obviously be giving you massive drops. So that way, all the new stuff is what the optics are. All of the returning Destiny 2 players or even new prospects for Destiny players are seeing new things that they've never seen before. So like, hey, maybe I will buy this. When they load in or click on a stream and they're like, you're playing Encore again for 10 hours now? Like, it looks bad. The optics are bad.
We had this with D2 launch. The most efficient way to level in D2 launch was running public events, and that sucked ass. This is a very similar vibe. However, there are some people out there who genuinely want to just farm the same activity over and over, so you might want to not take that completely away from them either. I'm not really too sure on that, though. What doesn't help is that it appears that everyone's bonus engrams are different. So I might have a fire team ops. That's a bonus activity, but my teammate might not. So instead of fighting about what activity we're going to run, we'd probably just try to do something that rewards us with the same amount of loot every time, which means going to whatever the farm of the day is. If this is the way the system's going to be, then Bungie needs to increase the activity offerings in Pinnacle Ops and incentivize ping-ponging around a bit more, even more than like the green engram thing that they're doing right now, like the bonus drops. In fact, it might not be a bad idea to increase offerings everywhere. Fireteam Ops feels like it has enough going on that a mid-season update would be okay, but Pinnacle Ops needs serious help. Fireteam Ops also has roughly the same time commitment per activity on offer, although I'm not including Onslaught or Coil in that. So it doesn't feel as bad to switch from activity to activity when it might only be like a minute difference at most on average. You also have these conquest activities that have specific level and modifier requirements to hit, and they drop a bunch of loot upon completion, but they're only available to run once. I haven't done my first one just yet, but I'm getting very strong vibes similar to when Grandmaster Nightfalls launched, and they were designed to just be a one and done. And those eventually became one of the most farmed and played activities in the game. I get that the idea is that you have to beat this challenge and get a big reward for doing so, but maybe make them like once a week thing. Make them a weekly thing. I know we're trying to get away from weekly leveling, but maybe a weekly. That way people can come in and get like a nice chunk of rewards once a week. Something to look forward to. Once a week. Some anecdotal stuff from my friends here, since I'm not level 300. There also appears to be some level scaling, grade scaling problems as you progress into the 300s, where if your team is too varied in levels, even with fire team power, you will not be able to place enough modifiers onto an activity that will enable you to get an A rank score, aka the best loot. This leads to people going to solo ops instead when they want to be playing with their friends. I'm not 100% on that. Again, I haven't hit 300, so
I believe that problem can be worked around because what you can do is have the person who's the highest fire team power be the leader, and then if they have an A grade, then everyone beneath them will have an A grade for that activity. I think that's how it works.
Feel free to update me in the comments on that one. PvP could also use some slight adjustments too. There are some solo ops that can get you loot at almost twice the rate of PvP matches due to their average length. Again, that comes back to like what's the most efficient, even though there's only so much that can be done about that. Then you have the 400 to 450 power grind, which I'm sure 99.9% of you watching are not even remotely close to. Again, I'm 240, not close either. As of a recent update, it seems like the 400 to 450 grind has gotten a little bit better now that people really understand that Guardian ranks really do improve your loot. People were hitting Guardian rank 9 and noted that the frequency and or quality of drops after 400 have very much improved. I can't speak to it myself just yet though.
Gotcha. Guardian rank 9 is where it's at. That's where I'm doing right now. Is I'm at Guardian rank like 7. You also have to get your power up in order to get to those Guardian ranks. So the two are in tandem, right? Like you have to level up and get your Guardian ranks up at the same time.
Conceptually, I am very on board with go do whatever you want to level, but there are definitely some things that need to be ironed out before it's in a good place. I want to see old raids be brought into the mix. I want to see old dungeons be brought into the mix. That content is too good and too fun to not be included in a system that was designed to revitalize old content. Pinnacle Ops definitely needs reinforcing as well. It is not a good look when the majority of people are spamming the same activity over and over again to level, even if it's the most efficient. I personally don't plan on torturing myself too much in Pinnacle Ops, though. Bungie's taking all this feedback, they're seeing where the frustration is, and they're very likely going to make some adjustments. It's a new system, it's very different to what we've had, and it was not going to launch perfectly. I will be waiting to see the fixes. Next, we have the new stat changes, and this is something I haven't gotten to dive into as much compared to the other things, so I can really only give some spark notes here. I have found myself saving so many pieces of gear because anything can be good now based on your build, which I think is awesome. I've gotten the question, what stats should I get on insert class here? And the answer is anything you want. We no longer live in a world where each class should be getting the exact same stats because those were just the best stats in the game. The best stats now completely depend on the build that you are going for. There is no blanket answer for go for these stats anymore, which I find very refreshing. I got a lot of people still thinking like, oh, I should just be getting weapons all the time, right? I'm working on a melee build right now. Melee's my most important stat. A different build, grenade's gonna be your most important stat. I'm still working my way to tier 3, so for now I think a lot of the stuff that I've saved will likely go in the trash, but eventually I know I will get to a place where I'm gonna wanna save a lot of armor. I look forward to...
And that place where you're going to want to save a lot of armor is, when you hit like 400 power. So it's like, it all leads you back to the power grind. You can try and spend your time doing anything else, but you got to be grinding your power. The power grind is a bit too crazy, Bungie. We've got to really address this in some big way. I think the biggest complaint I've heard across the board, and you can feel free to sound off in the comments, is that the power grind is a little too grindy.
Eventually purging all of my old gear for the new stuff, and we don't even have every combination of stat available in the game yet. Not even half of them. We're getting more vault space in the next expansion, I think anyway, so that will hopefully alleviate some short-term pains. The core economy, on the other hand, at least at the top end, feels pretty intense, although I'm not exactly at 400 power yet. But I've seen certain upgrades costing thousands of cores, And while I've seen people with hundreds of thousands of cores in their inventory already, that is still a very scary number to people. When I actually reach those levels, I can report on it a little bit better. But fortunately, tuning the amount of cores needed to level up gear is something that can be reasonably adjusted. So if it is that much of a problem, it'll be tweaked without too much difficulty, I assume anyway. At the lower end, I have had very little issue with the core economy. To those who have been struggling for whatever reason, just remember that you don't need to infuse literally every single item you ever get into your gear.
You actually do need to infuse very regularly, though, when you're doing portal activities, because it will change the grade that you get on the activity if you are so underleveled. So it's actually kind of a catch-22 there. You have to be constantly infusing as you continue to level up. You just don't have to do it every single time you get a +1 improvement. So give yourself a little bit of a buffer there and don't level up every single piece, so that way you don't completely run out of those materials, because like you said, it's like 7,000 plus materials to level up a piece at the higher levels.
All that being said, I have not even had a chance to log onto other characters yet to see how the leveling and core economy affects second and third characters. I would like to follow up on that at some point. As for the new gear bonuses, again, unless you farmed the literal perfect armor pre-expansion and you only plan on using armor with like weapons and super stats, I just find it so hard to believe that people won't eventually get and use new items. But this system appears to be so insanely hated that I cannot imagine it being long for this world. I can understand being somewhat annoyed with the avant-garde modifier, which is the new/featured gear only modifier, this early into the expansion when people are still fleshing out their armor sets and their weapons and whatnot. That being said, literally everyone I've spoken to completely despises the idea of this modifier. So I just completely scrapped this whole part of the video. I am not going to sit here to try to give feedback on a thing that most people want to see just completely eliminated and likely will be. For what it's worth, exotic class items should probably be considered new gear pretty much all the time because they're a pretty core part of the prismatic experience, and prismatic getting semi-blocked because of this modifier doesn't feel that great. Moving on, if the new gear, featured gear system is going to stick around, I think that the new gear tag should maybe be extended to a year instead of a single expansion if this is what Bungie is looking to do. Especially when this first season of the new era is only going to be 4.5 months instead of 6. That, or have something similar to the older sunsetting system where the new gear tag expires 1 year after its release. This way, it's not happening all at once for players, and they can do some mix and matching versus feeling like they need to start completely over from scratch. But again, wouldn't surprise me if new gear was killed off as a concept by Renegades, so I'm just going to save my breath here. Otherwise, there have been a lot of bugs or general issues with the expansion, although the game being buggy shouldn't come as much of a surprise anymore. Things like tons of missing patch notes, which I know is not done with malice, but it's still annoying to have to research what is intentional and what is not. Things like the stat revamp, not even being correct at launch. For reference, Bungie said that 70 of a stat currently will be equal to 100 of a stat pre-expansion, but Bungie came out and said that it was wrong, and it was actually 85 for 3 of the stats. Now, this has already been corrected, so like, okay, but how does something like that happen?
Yeah, the bugs, the mismanagement is pretty bad.
That's like the huge part of the revamp, and it launched broken for 2 weeks. It just leaves a terrible taste in the mouth seeing so many issues. The only thing that felt like it went smoothly was the actual launch of the expansion itself. I got in right away. A lot of my friends got in right away. Seems like the login experience was good, so that's nice, I guess. And Bungie has been posting a lot about feedback to things. Like they've already buffed ammo generation, and they're fixing/changing the raid difficulty because the balance was off for like all of the raids. So I can appreciate some of these faster moves being made here to patch the game. Ultimately, though, while I do think there are some novel things in the expansion, and while I don't hate it as much as it feels like most other people do, I don't think this expansion is something that will wake up someone who is tired of Destiny. If you stop playing
That's actually a fair criticism.
after Final Shape because you just felt done or you were just tired, I'm not sure how much of an adrenaline boost you're going to get from Edge of Fate, unless you were taking a break for non-burnout reasons. If you've been gone longer than that, I'm talking multiple years at this point, then maybe you'll have a good time just coming back and being back in the universe again. It just depends on why you stopped playing. People who were still enjoying the game before the expansion are still probably enjoying the experience to varying degrees, though. If you're someone who is upset that you need to grind new armor in the grinding armor game or grind new weapons in the grinding weapons game, this is probably not going to be for you. Bungie has absolutely brought back the grind with resetting our power level.
They brought back the grind in a big way too. Like this, it's grindier than ever before. We're back in the D1 year one days.
Changing the power level grind to actually be more than just 10 levels every few months. Tiered loot, tiers 1 through 5, all of that stuff. I'm guessing some tweaks will come over the next few months to these systems, so I would absolutely understand if you wanted to wait things out until Bungie does more updates and irons things out to make them a bit friendlier. Edge of Fate was mainly about foundational changes, which needed to happen at some point. But I understand foundational changes aren't as sexy as a new subclass or new aspects or sandbox things. Yeah, I would love a new subclass too. I would love new gameplay things, new sandbox things. But right now, all I can do is hope that they bring some of that stuff with upcoming expansions.
Yeah, well, quality of life updates are a necessity, of course, especially as we're entering into a new saga, and you can't just have, the same Destiny for another 10 years. So it's best to do it right at the start, I imagine. But they definitely need to go in tandem with new activities. The portal, if it had launched with like 2 new solo ops, a couple new fireteam ops, maybe even an exotic mission, I think that would have really sold people a lot more than replaying old missions. But that's my main focus point in my main criticism of the portal.
All that being said, and I know I've said that a lot in this video, the insane negativity surrounding this launch is probably the worst I've ever seen. And I do realize that I say that every time, but that's because it really feels like it just gets worse every time. I have never felt so bad for trying to enjoy new Destiny content in my life. It was a completely and utterly demoralizing experience trying to stream this game on the first day. People wondering why player counts are so low when the subreddit has spent the past 2 months talking about why they aren't going to play. I can hear the We Did It Reddits echoing across the world as we speak. People already deciding whatever they wanted to decide 30 minutes into the experience. My own YouTube audience talking shit about me and the game for like 6 hours straight during the campaign on my live stream. I'm like, why am I even here, bro? And it's not like
You gotta make that money.
a bunch of the criticisms aren't valid. Again, I tend to agree with a fair amount of things being said, but how things are said can matter more than what is actually being said. You could be making the greatest points of all time, but if you're being demeaning and vitriolic, I'm just not going to take you seriously as an individual. And that just makes it all the more difficult to want to continue to engage with this community. It just makes me want to clock in and clock out. And I find that really sad because I used to engage so much more. I used to spend hours and hours more doing that. Now that 6 p.m. alarm goes off and I just want to go home. And that sucks. That sucks really bad. It's exhausting. It's demoralizing. It makes me feel fake as a creator because in general, people feel like content creators must enjoy what they do 100% of the time and the content that they make. And if they don't, then they're inauthentic and shallow and just in it for the money. But that's where I feel right now, man. I'm not gonna be toxic positivity guy and say like, everything's great, you're all just being haters, right? Like, but I'm also gonna try to at least give constructive feedback and try to get this game into a better position as.
And to that point as well, I would say that you gotta just let people say what they want to say. People may not have the most articulate way of saying it. Like they're not going to give you a 12-page thesis on why they did not appreciate the sandbox tunings from Bungie, but they're going to say what they want to say. And right now there's a lot of negativity, and that negativity is justified because the certain expectations that they had for this expansion were not met. And so I don't think we need to like silence them, or maybe even, I'm sure some of it's just like you said, just vitriol and just being toxic for no reason. But it's just, you got to take that, like it's social media, you got to take the good with the bad.
As much as I am able to make that happen, which is probably not that much. I would say, let me know how you're feeling about the expansion, but I feel like I already know the answer. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.
Wow, that is a really wild way to end that video, as well as to say, he wants to know what you're thinking, but he already knows the answer because people are going to be overtly negative or, like you said, just vitriol. But I think that that's kind of where you go wrong with a lot of this stuff is that you should definitely let people voice their opinions and let their opinions feel like they're heard. And, we obviously want to give feedback. And I know he just wants to give like constructive feedback. He wants things to be handled in a, more intelligent way. He doesn't need a bunch of like, F Bungie and everyone on the team should get fired and all of that crazy business, right? He just wants to have, a fun time playing Destiny 2. He wants his audience to engage with the stuff he does in a positive way. And unfortunately, we're in a weird era with Destiny right now where there's some good things, but there's also some bad things. A lot of expectations aren't being met. And so you're kind of seeing a lot of that backlash, and people are just much more vocal now than ever before because I think everyone has finally found social media. Like COVID made everyone in the whole world sick for like a good 2 years, right? We kept getting sick and we get COVID and you got to stay inside and you can't go to your job. And so we all just went on to social media. And after that, everyone's just like, oh, yeah, I do have a Twitter account. I guess I will just like voice my opinion on everything I have an opinion about, which is everything. And so now there's just way more negativity and more positivity. There's just way more people on social media, and the voices are always getting crazier. And it's always, it's just a crazy time on social media. So whenever someone joins my chat and they're like, dude, F this game, the game is dead, I'm just like, I just joke with them. I'm like, yeah, bro, get dead game. You're right. Like, I just have fun with it. Like, it's not that serious. It doesn't ruin my day. It doesn't make me not want to be a content creator or not appreciate the job that I have just because people are, being negative, man. So that last bit, I don't quite agree with, but for the most part, I agree with his criticisms of The Edge of Fate. Let me know how you feel about it, though, down in the comment section below. And make sure to subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Smash the like button. We'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Later.